Welcome to the Fully Charged Show podcast. Lately, me and Robert have been up to all manner of tricks. I actually have hardly seen him, he's hardly seen me. The Porsche Taycan got unveiled in its finished, fully operational form. It's very, very similar to the car that I drove, which thankfully has had a huge amount of interest on the Fully Charged YouTube channel, over 1.5 million views at last count, so that's pretty cool. I'm actually driving that car in the next couple of weeks on the road, on a road trip. And if you haven't seen any of the other latest videos on the YouTube channel, you've got an electric JCB mini digger that Robert's having way too much fun on. You've got me walking around the new Zoe, the new Vauxhall Corsa electric, and the brand new Mini electric. So back to the talk you've tuned in to hear. This talk was on the second day of Fully Charged Live. I desperately wanted to have a talk about EV conversions on the Giga stage. This niche market has sprung from almost nowhere to be a highly valued and potentially lucrative business model for people. And also, with my experience converting cars to electric, I invited some of the top people I know to come and talk with me on the stage. So the panelists that I chose were Richard Morgan from Electric Classic Cars, Chris Hazell from Zero EV, and Dorian Hindmarsh from QWest. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. It's late, isn't it, already? Sorry. This is a talk about electric classic cars. A subject that's very close to my heart, but a subject that's very close to these guys' hearts. So I've got three experts who are going to join me on stage. I've got Chris Hazell from Zero EV, Richard Morgan from Electric Classic Cars, and Dorian Hindmarsh from QWest. Please welcome them on stage. Electric classic cars. Well, the whole scene with electric classic cars has grown a lot in the last, 5 years?
It's gone crazy.
Yeah. And before we get deeper into it, can you guys just quickly introduce yourselves and your background, what you do, so people know?
Sure. So I'm Richard Morgan. I'm founder of a company called Electric Classic Cars, and we've been around for about 3-4 years now, converting classic cars. It started as a hobby, and it kind of got out of control from there, really. So we're specialising in anything from 50s, 60s, 70s, maybe early 80s, taking those classic cars and converting to electric. So that's me, that's what I do.
I'm Chris Hazell from Zero EV. We specialise in reverse engineering of OEM components to use in classic cars. Currently we do Tesla, so high performance stuff. And my main thing is we supply business to business to people like Richard, so we can bring out some really high performance Ferraris.
Yep.
So you tap into the brains and the software of crashed Teslas.
Currently, yeah, we've got a Model 3 motor and bits at the moment that we're playing with.
Model 3?
Yeah.
Someone's crashed one already?
Yeah.
In Europe?
No, it was one in Europe, yeah. We got this one from America, so we've got that in bits at the moment, doing stuff on that. And then we're starting to look at the VW inverters and things now to see if we can make them available, because there's going to be tens of thousands of those floating around, so it should hopefully bring some of the costs down for some of these bits as well then.
Fantastic. Good. Dorian.
I'm Dorian Hindmarsh, and I'm from QWest, and we specialise in coach work and bodywork repairs and modifications to vehicles. And classic cars is something we do as a theme, often with the restoration of the vehicle itself. And more recently, you might have seen the Tesla shooting brake we did downstairs.
Oh yeah, if you haven't seen the Tesla shooting brake that we did a Fully Charged episode on a while ago, it is down in the, what do you call it,
paddock garage? Paddock garage, I guess, yeah.
And while you're down there, because you must go down there if you haven't already been, many of these guys' creations are down there. The electric Ferrari, the Volkswagen Type 2 crew cab, the fast Beetles.
Yep. And then Chris's cars are down there as well.
Yeah.
A lot of the guts that's out of Chris's cars, for instance, in the Goldwing, what's that, buddy?
The DeLorean?
DeLorean.
How can you forget the DeLorean?
Well, you know,
Lamborghini, go back in time and start us again, you know.
Well, let's start with the DeLorean. Okay, prime example, a very recognisable classic car that most people think is brilliant. But the only thing that let that car down when it was new was its engine. It had a very disappointing...
Okay.
Come on, it did.
There's a tenuous
If you
link
lift the
here.
shell off, there's quite some big issues underneath
Oh, really?
with the chassis design, I think.
Well,
It was a Lotus chassis, wasn't it?
There's a tenuous link because our engineering
Hides the
director,
rust.
Jim Rauter, one of his first cars he was involved in designing was the DeLorean.
That's true. I saw a big model of it in his office, but he didn't want me to film his office, so we didn't put it in the show. But it is lovely. Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what you come at from the electrifying classic cars. You're trying to address all the negative aspects of owning a classic car as a daily driver, hopefully. That's what we're trying to encourage people to kind of get engaged in classic cars and use them, but not be concerned about breaking down, maintaining them, knowing how to read the Haynes manual, which is all the fun and games we probably had as, like, in our younger days.
Yeah.
But, if you really want to use a classic car and have it as a reliable car for the average person, you need to make it easy to drive, reliable, and to do that, the best way, really, I'm saying this as a ex-petrol head of 25 odd years, is to make it electric, because there's no maintenance, simple to drive, you put your foot down, away you go, you to turn it on,
no warming
like
up.
There's no like, go, oh, you flooded it now, oh, you've got to do that and that and that and then that.
But what it also does is it means that from now on in, you'll be able to use classic cars more frequently in an ever-changing world where legislation might stop certain cars of certain engine types not going into places.
Yeah.
And because, there are some electric classic conversions that I'm a bit like, ooh, not sure I would have done that.
What are you looking at me for?
However, we live in a free world, and that person might own that car and might want to take it into a city where you just literally wouldn't have been able to have taken it.
Yeah, low emission zones, for instance, in London, and they're going to come into other cities. That's for sure. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
And let's not get out of that fact. Pollution in cities is a real bad health problem.
Yeah.
So why exclude classic cars just because they might do a couple of 100 miles in the city of London? It's not a small problem. Every bit of pollution is a problem. What's one more plastic bag thrown in the sea type attitude? That's not acceptable.
Yeah.
So having a low emission zone should include classic cars, I feel, and electrifying them obviously means that you can drive them with a clear conscience into
There's another thing. I mean, the affordability. Initially, the outlay of converting might put a few people off, but if you're that passionate about owning and operating a classic vehicle, and it's your pride and joy or your aspiration to have the styling of that classic vehicle, being able to enjoy it cost effectively. And we're talking about taxation, we're talking about running costs, maintenance running costs as well as fuel.
Yeah.
These are things that allow that car to go through for another 20, 30, 40, 50 years and continue that upgrade cycle. What's wrong with upcycling cars?
But from the environmental point of view, what Chris does, for instance, second lifing the parts out of them. I mean, most carbon efficient car you can have is a car that's already been built. Take parts from a car that's already crashed, put them together and second life in the both of them, and basically making a car that's going to be for the 21st century for another 20 years. So doing the stuff that Chris does is fantastic for us as a supplier, because it means that we're really being very ethically and environmentally friendly by second life in the parts out of crashed Teslas.
So in a way, it's future-proofing classics, depending on what you want, and them being able to be used more and seen more. The thing I love about classic cars is actually seeing them out and about. I mean, there's an awful lot of classics which just get mothballed and put onto static display. You never actually get to see them driving. You might have seen here at the show downstairs the Aston Martin DB6 Volante that Aston are offering as a conversion. Jaguar did it are doing it with the E-Type Zero, again a totally reversible, sympathetic conversion where if you want to, you can put the engine back in, so you're not butchering the car, you're keeping it quite sympathetic, which I think a lot of people feel very strongly about, myself included.
The only thing really you're missing with electrifying a classic car is the noise. You're taking out the sound, you're replacing it with a different sound, but everything else is a benefit. I mean, you're getting zero maintenance, you're getting more power, more reliability. Everything about driving an electric classic means that it's more enjoyable and easier to drive.
Yeah.
Now, the noise issue for some people with a V8 or a V12 might be a big issue, and some people say to me, well, why don't you replicate the noise in the stereo? And what I normally say to them is, well, did people replicate horse noises when they first built petrol cars?
Of course they did.
You can
buy a pair of coconuts on the passenger seat.
Put their foot down.
Actually, that's a great idea. You're onto something.
Horse noises with electric cars.
Yeah.
Mate,
I do think, in all honesty, I do think with the noise augmentation will start to happen more and more, probably with the
We
young
have done it.
generation.
We did stuff in Macau for the shows. So we did like a stunt show in Macau. Richard did some buggies. We did some space-framed vehicles.
This is the Fast and Furious.
Yeah.
Are you allowed to
This was
another one, actually.
Electron it is in Macau. It's a year-long show. They do drift demos and all sorts.
Yeah.
But we did noise boxes on them with wheel sensors. So depending on the RPM they were at, they've made different noises, which for low-speed stuff around city centres and stuff is probably not a bad idea. Because we've been at rallycross events with the Skyline, electric Skyline, and the amount of people we've nearly knocked over driving around is quite
especially at low speed.
Low speed it's.
You've got to say that of course, is quite old tech. Lotus did it back in the 90s, and there was no market for it. But their marketing campaign at the time was to fit it to very quiet vehicles that were the drivers wanted to aspire to hear the V12 Ferrari over the top of their Toyota Corolla. That's what they did. So
really?
Yes.
In the 90s?
Right. Back in the 90s, yeah. And in fact, up in the early 2000s, they had Priuses that were kitted with sound emulation systems that were synchronized to the engines. And my favorite was the Jetsons spaceship.
Seriously? On a first-gen Prius?
On his first-gen Prius.
Does it make you want one?
But just be clear, though, from my background, noise is pollution.
Yeah.
And it's all very well having these loud, massive exhaust systems on V8s, V12s. And I love the sound of a V8, don't get me wrong, I love it. But it's a pollution. And actually in society, we have to consider that being respectful as we start to get more population and more people close together, being respectful over sound, being respectful over emission of any type, we should reduce it. And by having an electric vehicle, driving silently, and I know the argument about pedestrians, I didn't hear it coming. Come on, Rolls-Royce produces about 40 decibels as it's cruising by. That's more than a prize.
Yeah.
Or less than a prize, sorry.
Yeah,
so you're going to get knocked over by that, whether it was electric or not.
Yeah, yeah.
So have your wits about you. Don't get sucked into your mobile phone, crossing the road. How many people have seen that? Electric car companies are looking at how we can implement safe sounds. They don't need to, I don't believe. They should be silent.
I get in my e-Golf, and the first thing I do is I disarm the augmented sound thing. I'm sorry, I just do. Because I genuinely...
Because you want to make the sounds yourself?
No, I've got a pair of coconuts on the passenger seat, and I don't mind telling you. No, it's because I just think, well, if somebody's going to just walk out without looking, then obviously I don't want to hurt them or anything, but...
Is that the car that has the big teeth and the bull bars on the front?
Yeah,
okay.
That's the one. You've seen it.
I had a Toyota Priuses and stuff for donkey's years, when they first came out, and hybrids. I've had this low-speed, zero sound problem for years, and I live in mid-Wales, which is short for middle of nowhere Wales. There's nothing there.
It's the middle of nowhere Wales.
It literally is, yeah. There's hills, sheep, and rain.
Yeah.
That's it. And you pull off the main road into my little village, and then with a hybrid, then it goes into electric mode. And then there's always a little lady just like in front of you like this, and you can't beat the horn, just in case you might keel over.
It's a bit rude.
And what do? You can't rev the engine, so you turn up the stereo a little bit. But now, I got a green VW crew cab downstairs, which used to be a fire engine in South Africa. And it's still got the old 1960s little bell on the bottom of it, like a yard bell.
So you do that as an old lady?
Yeah. So instead of beeping the horn now, there's this little tinkle, like that. So she's probably, oh, my phone.
Well, sound is obviously optional with electric cars. One of my biggest questions, a lot of people will come and say, I like the idea of converting a classic car. I don't really understand the cost. I don't really understand the options involved. And from my own personal journeys with old cars, converting is, you can go down the completely bespoke components route. So aftermarket motor, or, custom motor with a custom controller, and a custom battery pack, or you can repurpose an existing car, let's say a crashed Tesla.
Yeah, I mean, the big benefit there is, say, if in 10 years' time you get issues, you can just go and pick up another one from the scrapyard and put it in yourself.
Okay.
That's the issue you said about the custom stuff, is you'll sit there and wait 6 months, a year for them to build another one for you.
Yeah.
If something happens. So at least with those parts, you can, in theory, repair them yourself, or the way we're trying to do it with the plug-and-play system is a local garage can do it.
Right.
Or say we supply to Richard and 3 or 4 other companies in the UK, they're all running the same system.
Yeah.
So you don't have to always go back to mid-Wales, the middle of nowhere. You could pop into London to someone.
You don't have to go back to Mid-Wales if you don't want to. It's very nice.
The other good thing about having the embedded carbon is already in those components, and also the amount of R&D budget goes into Tesla or Nissan or those OEM products is humongous. So the best technology is always in repurposed, like modern car technology.
And that's your favoured method?
Well, if for performance applications, yeah, but when you're going to like a motor, because there's 2 flavours of electric conversions for us. We do what's called an engine swap type of conversion. So you're taking out the old smelly thing out the front, leaving the gearbox there, and you put an electric motor in via an adapter plate and you plonk it onto the gearbox.
Yeah.
So the gearbox and the rest of the car still thinks there's an engine attached to it. You're changing gear and there's clutch there.
Yeah.
It just so happens it's an electric motor.
Yeah.
So that's essentially just a very generic induction or electric motor, let's say.
DC motor?
Yeah. DC motor is a bit old school now, but it's usually an AC induction motor or a synchronous reluctance permanent magnet type motor.
Right.
And
I'll
those are
explain
normally
what that is later if everyone wants to know what those motors are.
Sorry?
We can explain later what each one of those motors are.
Yeah.
Yes.
An induction motor induces the magnetism in the motor. A permanent magnet already has the magnets sort of in, so they're more efficient. It's probably
Technical terms.
to put it. But there's 2 flavours, as I say. So you can either drop the engine out, put an electric motor onto the gearbox, and you've still got gears, and that's a very reversible process. And you drop out the fuel tank, and you put it in a battery pack.
Yeah.
Kind of the E-Type, Jag, Aston Martin, DB5 kind of way of doing
Idea,
it.
yes.
So we do that, and the red Beetle downstairs is exactly like that. So the fuel tank bolts, exactly the same bolts for the battery pack.
Yeah.
The other way to do it is kind of like repurposing a drivetrain out of a Tesla, for instance,
Yeah.
and dropping the engine and gearbox out, welding in some mounts
Like
here
a
or
cradle
there.
that fits in the original mounting
Correct.
positions. Yeah.
And that's a little bit more of a deep dive into like getting the weld round and doing some alterations. Not much. It's only a
Fabrication.
light touch.
Yeah.
Not chopping a chassis up. But that's the other way to do it. Is you're basically having a direct drive unit with no gears.
And there's obviously a cost difference.
A little bit
Is there?
of a cost difference, not as much as you might think.
Right.
They're about cost neutral depending on how complex you get. Because obviously if you're going with a 450 or 600 horsepower performance Tesla drive unit, I mean do you want to do costs?
So the base is around 450, 500 brake. They come in at around 10 grand as a kit. So you get like your motor, you get your looms, your low voltage system, your display, and those sort of bits.
Yeah.
And then you can get the smaller one, which is 300 brake for 8,000 with the same sort of kit.
So you basically deliver it on a pallet, all of the main organs. Yeah. You're like a grave robber.
So we're just
Teslas.
just trying to do away with that bit of hours of hand soldering and putting relays in different places, random fuse boxes, to having like a nice little pre-made extrusion box and pre-made looms that you plug in. So it removes all those little errors. Yeah. And then the sort of errors over long periods of time, over years, that's where the faults will appear.
Yeah.
So if it's in a pre-made PCB that's all done and sealed, then the chances are long term it's going to be.
Do you think that's a cheaper way? If I was going to say I want a 500 horse Rover SD1.
Yeah. Tesla drive unit in.
Tesla drive unit,
But
Tesla brain.
Probably worth pointing out that the Rover SD1 never had 500 horsepower. And as a classic car, that's something that's another grey area for discussion.
Well, then you're talking about resto modding and hot rodding, I suppose.
Yes, you are. And the same rules apply for sticking big Chevrolet base V8s into your Rover SD1 as they do for sticking powerful
who
electric
would be
motors.
stupid enough to take a 45 horsepower Beetle and put a 600 horsepower Tesla?
Exactly.
Nobody's that stupid.
Yeah.
Surely, Dorian.
It's just
It's terrible.
it's not
isn't it?
what
But
I signed up
what, for me, from the classic car conversion point of view, I'd like to sort of make sure that people are understanding these issues.
Yeah.
You can't just do that. The amount of work you put in to do that isn't something the average hobbyist.
Oh, no, that's not
/
DIY.
classic car enthusiast that knows a bottle of teacup could do.
You need to know what you're doing. If you're doing a conversion yourself, you need to know which end of a battery is what. I mean, the battery packs can kill you, in short.
Yes.
What Chris does is try to make it simpler and less, and more safe to do.
Yeah.
But you still, as a hobbyist, a DIY guy, really needs to know what they're doing. And really, preferably, it should be done by a conversion shop.
Each commercial
that actually
company,
really does know what they're doing.
And I
You've got-
suppose, sorry.
I was just going to say that things like, the torque, electric motors are a completely different drive experience, than a petrol engine. They produce 100% of their torque at 0 RPM.
Yeah.
And those torque dynamics, the vehicle was not designed to handle that.
Yeah.
So you've got to be doing a bit of slide rule calculations to kind of work out what you're going to
Anybody
do.
who wants to see that in action, have a look at my Facebook page of the Ferrari with about 100 meters worth of wheel
burnt
spin,
tyres, yeah.
smoke coming out the back. And that's not an engine blowing up, that's just tyres dying.
Yeah.
And that's what a Tesla drive unit looks like without traction control on.
And
don't
on
know, you don't need
semi-slicks as well at that
traction
time.
It started off with grip at this end, it ended up with slicks by the end of the 100 meters.
The other thing to bear in mind is also, if you're going to convert a Classic, some people want to put back into the Classic the equivalent power
Yeah.
that it was born with.
Yeah.
So you could say this was a 50 horsepower car, which means the brakes were fit for 50 horsepower,
Correct.
the suspension. And in the case of that Aston DB6, Aston said because it's a reversible thing, they've built it so that it does the same performance as the original car, same weight as the original car, same suspension, same steering.
So a Ford Mondeo could overtake it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What we've got downstairs is kind of a mild and a wild option. So we've got a yellow bus and a red Beetle, which is kind of like, as you say there, it's kind of similar performance, maybe a bit better than the original engines.
Yeah.
And on the red Beetle, for instance, we put disc brakes on the front of it 'cause it's a 1965 Beetle, and it's usually quicker to stick your hand out the window to slow the car down than to put your foot on the brake. So we put disc brakes on the front. And then, obviously, when you're putting a 600 horsepower motor in something stupid like a Beetle or like my VW Crew Cab with 450 horsepower, it's very important then not to just ignore the suspension and the brakes. So my Beetle, to give you an example, I've got Porsche 996 front suspension and brakes on it. So it stops on a dime because it gets to 60 in about 3 seconds.
Yeah.
So we don't just do the electric conversions, we think about the safety aspect of upgrading the suspension and brakes. And on the Ferrari, for instance, the other thing that people don't realize when you're converting a classic car is you can actually move the weight distribution around. So the weight distribution of the original Ferrari 308 was about, I think it was 43% on the front, 57 at the back. Which doesn't sound like much, it's not that far away from 50-50, but believe me, it was very light on the front, and he went into a corner and understeered. I was quite disappointed by the Ferrari handling when I first drove it, when it's pedal. I had high expectations.
Disappointed by an 80s Ferrari, or was it 70s? 80s?
82, 83, 83, 2. Thanks, Peter. The owner of the Ferrari up there. 1982 Ferrari 308. So when I drove it, it understeered at the front because it was quite light.
Yeah.
Now with electric conversions on the classics, you can address things like that by putting a few more batteries at the front.
So you can move the packs around.
Exactly. So we had a
Split them.
50-50 weight distribution, and one of the unexpected benefits of electric conversion on classics is addressing the handling.
Yeah.
And now it handles like it's on rails. It's amazing handling.
Well, there was a talk we were chatting in a previous talk today about the high value of a crashed EV. You know, residuals of non-crashed EVs have risen in the last 2 years because of supply and demand, and it seems that salvage cars are really, really popular. You know, people can't wait for Teslas to crash.
Yeah.
And then, you know, there's companies out in the States like QWest who do the same. You know, that they are buying as soon as they can find a damaged.
That's what we do, pretty much.
But you don't have to have crashed. I mean, Nissan will sell you equipment to directly purchase and procure the battery systems and motor systems if you're a credible industrial business. So it's not as if you have to rely upon that dubious roll of 50 notes in your pocket and have to buy stuff second-hand. You can have credible OEM equipment.
Yes.
And that is going to be a growth market, not for classic conversion per se, but this kind of hit-and-miss market of retrofit on existing infrastructure. And you hit a valid point earlier, Richard, when you talked about the carbon offset. One of the things I'm interested in isn't just the classic car market, a little bit off tangent here, but is in the retrofit to more modern vehicles, because they've still got a lot of life to give, as classic cars do.
Well, there's a lot of modern cars in scrapyards which don't look like they should die.
No, they've often got Euro 5 crash safety, they've got airbags, all the rest of it, which, by the way, classic cars often don't have. So one of the big risks that we've got to discuss here, I think, in classic car terms, is the safety implications. You can change the handling and the dynamics, but you are still driving a car from that period that you took it from.
Yeah, there's no crash zones or airbags in classic cars.
Or even some of them don't even have compressible steering columns or seatbelts. So one of the considerations always when you're increasing the power and performance is your brakes, yes, but also the safety for the occupants and others around you.
I know there's going to be, and the people are developing now, an increase in kits for classic cars. Bosch haven't brought it to market yet, but the e-axle, they keep talking about bringing an affordable kind of plug-and-play rear axle setup with a battery pack that's sort of idiot-proof. Do you think we're going to see a real spike in interest over the next, quite a short amount of time, like next 3 years, of those kinds of kits becoming more and more available?
Yes, I think that's something that Chris is working on as well, sort of thing, but they have to be as plug-and-play as possible. The wiring looms have to all be done.
Yeah.
Literally, battery box goes in, wiring looms all done, there's a high-voltage plug here, and you literally go plug there, bolt there, in it goes, switch it on, done.
And then you have an engineer come and check it first. It's a bit like my dad repairing the boiler himself, but then he gets his mate round who's a Corgi engineer and just goes, "Can you just check I've done this right?" He goes, "Yeah, it's about right." Okay.
Switch it on, Dave. Does it blow up?
Yeah, exactly. Basically,
I can't hear a bang. Yeah, it's all right.
It's the sort of thing we did with the DeLorean. So Clint, who did the DeLorean, it was the first EV he'd ever converted.
Right.
So if you look at that DeLorean, it is absolutely flawless, but it's his first ever one.
Wow.
So we guided him through the whole process, and then one of the engineers, we did a couple of visits, went through the process, CAD designs and things like that, just to make sure everything was done correctly. And then we went down before it came out here and just did an idiot check over everything and brought the system online with him, just to make sure he was happy, nothing was too dangerous, it was all done correctly. So that's sort of thing to do, I think, with...
I think it's eventually going to happen, isn't it? More easier plug-and-play type of kits.
It'll encourage a hands-on approach to cars again, because obviously one of the joys of classic cars is the simplicity, and some people enjoy tinkering. I enjoy the tinkering aspect of an old car, and so if you can convert it, but you can still do some stuff yourself, or you've done some of the conversion yourself safely, you have an understanding of how it works, so you're a bit more involved in it emotionally, which I like. And younger people maybe coming into the classic car world, you want to kindle that fire, otherwise classic cars just becomes a dying thing as
steam engines.
Yeah.
There is
if you go to a steam rally, there's not many teenagers there.
No.
I was there when I was a teenager. I was in the minority.
But it is an inevitability that as classic cars become more and more, or less and less actually, on the road, the ability to convert will give them longevity, yes.
Yeah.
But in real terms, there will be less of them to convert.
Yes.
People, they'll become stalwarts. They'll go, "No, I'm not going to take the engine out of this car. This is what it was built with."
Yeah.
So it is a very interesting niche and time for these classic cars to have a second breathing of life. But there is an inevitability over hydrocarbons that it's going to get harder to get. You are going to have, as you rightly point out before, restrictions on where you can go.
Yeah.
And it's a last dying moment for classic cars that we can see now to do these conversions.
So what I think you're saying is we should convert a steam engine to electric. Is that what I'm hearing, Dorian?
Why not? That would work.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Well, you get a Tesla-powered steam engine.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
It's just weird.
That's like steampunk gone too far,
One thing we haven't touched on is, and I think this is going to increase in this interest, is the aesthetics of the classic car engine. People like to pop a bonnet and look at the guts of an
They make nice
and that's
tables.
important. I mean, I want to, with our conversions, the aesthetics of the engine bay and everything, it needs to be in keeping with kind of the look and feel of the car. And what we try to do is just not make it look like a generic metal box.
Just Lego, grey Lego.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
like
what you
grey
don't
Lego. We want a bit of like polished aluminium there, and a bit of like black, like polished stuff there, and some stainless steel braided hose coming in.
Yeah.
We kind of try to keep the conversions, the look and feel, not just in the engine bay, but also in the dashboard themselves. So some things we do, for instance, is the fuel gauge. We'll repurpose the fuel gauge to be the battery gauge.
Yeah. Okay.
And we'll repurpose the coolant temperature to be the coolant temperature for the Tesla drive, for instance.
Yeah.
Oil pressure is a problem. You know, we might leave that one, but...
So some people want, the original look.
Yeah.
They want it all to be stealth.
Yeah.
To all intents and purposes, they want a car of a certain era to just look as was.
Yeah, well,
just happens to be quiet and efficient.
We try to do as much of a light touch as like the look and feel and the aesthetics as possible. It's a little bit like if you've got a listed building, like built in, I don't know, 1800s, and you bought that house with cold fireplaces in and like drafty windows and stuff, you don't necessarily want to wreck that. You want to put in a period sort of like correct double glazing that's not too out of sorts, and central heating that's sort of like, nice and modern and warms the place up to make it a more enjoyable place to be and easier to live with. And that's what we're trying to do with the electric classic cars. It's not kind of trying to ruin them and have too much modern looking stuff in them. We're just trying to do the guts of them to be easier to live with and more enjoyable, and bring classic cars into the 21st century a little bit.
I think with the classic cars, it is controversial converting them.
Oh, yeah.
But let's look at the swings and roundabouts of classic cars. How many classic cars have we seen bang erased, have fallen onto that poor bottom rail of unrestored mess that it's sacrilege? I'd far rather see a classic car turn into an EV than getting those horrible muddy fingers on it and having it smashed up on some banger track. Because, let's be clear, if they can't be afforded to run, and they can't get the fuel, if they can't get restrictions, more and more can't get parts, they're going to end up in that horrible arena.
We could just 3D print classic car parts now, though. That's the joy, that's the modern world we're in. It's amazing. You can make it look like it's an old bonnet, but it's made of carbon fibre. I love all that stuff. Well, I'd love to talk more about this, and I know we will do in future episodes of Fully Charged. We're going to do a quick Q&A. So has anybody got any questions?
So I'm one of those people who loves classic-looking cars, but I'm also one of those people who loves modern technology. I like ABS, I like power-assisted brakes, I like all the technology. So when I come to one of you guys and I get a Citroen DS Safari converted to have Tesla running gear underneath
Good choice of car.
Thank you very much.
Great-looking car, crap engine.
Well, it still looks good, and then I stick my Tesla running gear underneath it. So who do I take it to service? Where do I get this thing serviced?
To service what?
Well, despite what you're saying, Tesla still has a service record. You have to have things serviced.
The motor won't need to be serviced. What will need to be serviced when you take a Tesla to be serviced is they'll fill up your windscreen washer bottle and they'll do some
check your
basic
suspension ball joints and
suspension.
Exactly, it's
all sorts of bits. So my point is, yes, these things may be well built and sealed and all that good stuff, and I'm buying one, so I'm on the board. But there will be maintenance. There will be things needed doing. For me, it's a confusion. When you've got a hybrid of a classic from one manufacturer and a modification from either yourselves or sort of standardized conversion, like, we're running Tesla gear, a whole batch of it, that's supposed to work together. Then, where do I go to get constant maintenance over the years, 10 years, 15 years, whatever I'm supposed to be trying to keep this thing running? It's going to need it. So.
The first thing is, of course, it's already a classic car, so where do you go for your classic bits for support and service? That's the first section. The second section, I would suggest, is if you chose to take that Citroen and stick in a Chevy V8, for example, where would you go then? So what we're saying is, with these guys, I'm sure you guys are going to talk about it, but there is tools, mechanisms, online portals, information.
It's a lot
direct
less
access.
maintenance you have to do on an
Exactly.
EV. I mean, a Tesla drive unit, I mean, you probably, if not already seen it, there's a video of somebody taking one apart after 500,000 miles, and literally it just looks like new inside. These things have hardly any maintenance, if there's zero maintenance, close to zero maintenance as there is for the electric drivetrain, if you like. So any maintenance you're going to need to do on these, or upkeep of these cars, is going to be to do with the classic car aspect of it, less to do with the actual motor itself.
There's this argument that a lot of classic cars are MOT exempt now, from 77 at the moment, or from 78, 79?
Yep.
Now, I don't agree with that,
No.
because I think it's potentially dangerous to people that don't check their own cars, or they run cars on a shoestring in the wrong manner. So what I would say, and what I do with my own car, is you can either get an MOT check, and a lot of MOT garages have to now, or starting to be trained in high voltage, because obviously there's loads of hybrids on the road that need MOTs now. And you can get them to check not just the classic car bits, but the modern bits. Simple stuff like, has something come loose? Or you can get a sort of pre-MOT check done of all those bits, and then you could take it to somebody like these guys to just say, can you just plug it in and make sure its brain is happy? We're talking once a year. It's just a check. And that's the thing about most electric cars, isn't it? Most modern electric cars, it's about preventative checks rather than actually delving in and doing stuff.
I think we're right now we're at a point where we're ahead of everyone else. But you've got people like Cleveland EV.
Yeah.
They're getting trained in all the EV side of things, and we've had a lot of colleges and stuff come to us recently to see whether we can start teaching the young generations about the mix of conversion stuff.
Yeah.
So I think the way we've got to look at it is that there's all these garages out there right now, and all of them need to still make a living in the future. So they're all going to step in now, and they're going to start learning the systems we're fitting, because they're going to need to start doing maintenance on these vehicles.
Yeah, mate, a lot of MOT garages
They're all gonna
need
have
to
to.
train in high voltage to survive.
It's a valid point. I was on the stand at the London Motor Show a couple of weeks ago, and a guy whose main bread and butter job is servicing and maintaining diesel engines in black cabs, and he's looking at a cliff of business. And he said, I need to understand how these work, these electric transmission systems, if I stand a chance of paying my mortgage.
Yeah.
Now that's an interesting concept that a lot of people maybe didn't consider.
Yeah.
These garage mechanics, specialist diesel people, specialist petrol engine people, they've got to retrain.
Yeah.
And that means there's going to be a knowledge base available for Tesla powertrains, for Nissan Leaf powertrains, for all the other, and the data comms and communication systems, and all of the CAN bus systems that fit on there. And all of it, that's going to happen because it's inevitable.
Yeah.
So right now, you're limited, these fine gentlemen here, but just give it a few weeks. Because
But also, it's
look at
not
the
that
popularity.
scary. If you know there's such a small amount of maintenance involved, it's not as scary prospect as it might first appear.
Just to go back to the discussion you were having about sound, the sound of classic cars, did anybody notice the bit in the news this morning about noise cameras are going to be trialled?
Noise cameras?
Like speed cameras?
Yeah,
Where?
noise pollution cameras in cities to catch noisy cars. Now, I thought they missed a trick on that, because I thought they should have pollution cameras, because you can sense pollution remotely with cameras, and to have the owners put on noise is a bit silly. There's more health risk with pollution than there is with noise. So they should.
Yeah, but I think the noise is probably easier to do, isn't it?
It's cheaper to do, and that's what it'll come down to. But if you look at the actual cost of health issues in cities from pollution, they should have looked at it from the wider pictures and looked at it from pollution cameras rather than noise cameras.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest, though, that bit of news will probably make people aware of noise, and the issue of electric cars not making a noise will be less of an issue.
Well, I think we're going to see...
Is there an issue, though? I mean, apart from the safety when at low speed, I mean, I think it's a good thing that...
You're still going to get tyre noise.
My car's very noisy.
Yeah.
With that Tesla motor in it, it's
What
not quiet.
I mean, cities are going to get quieter. So what I would say is, if there's any investors out there in houses, buy houses on the A1, the M1, the M25. you know those houses that are in a place where you just go, Who bought that house? Buy that house now. That's what you want to do, because it won't be as polluted. It'll be a much better, not a much better place, a better place than it was. Sorry.
Supplementary question. Is anybody interested in electric microlight aircraft? I want to convert mine.
Microlight?
It's a classic microlight, 30 years old.
It'll never take off.
Where's my snare drum and my cymbal when I want it?
Mine's broken.
Listen, look, it's a great subject, and I'm glad that there's so many people who are engaged with it and interested. And it will continue to evolve. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of this session. We've got to do things like giving away prizes, apparently, which Robert's waiting to give money away to people. So, guys, can we just thank Dorian, and can we thank Chris, and can we thank Richard for coming on? Lovely. Some very useful information with this talk. I hope you guys and girls learn as much as I did. Don't forget to head to our website and buy your ticket for Fully Charged Live USA at the Circuit of Americas in Austin, Texas on the 1st and the 2nd of February 2020 to be exact. Filled to the brim with EVs and clean energy technology, tickets are in limited supply, so get a wriggle on and head to our website now, see the show notes and get them whilst you still can. I will be there, and also a man called Robert. Thank you to our Patreon supporters. You know by now how utterly, insanely invaluable you guys are to us and the Fully Charged platform. You are the linchpin to everything we do. We will never take you guys for granted, so thank you ever so much. So if you're also interested in becoming a Patreon, or you don't know what it is, follow the links in the show notes. Don't forget, leave us a 5-star rating and a review on your favourite podcast player, as it does help us to get discovered and gives us credibility. And finally, don't forget to subscribe to our 2 YouTube channels, which includes Fully Charged Regen, which has these talks in video form.